Paralympic and Olympic athlete Oscar Pistorius shot and killed his girlfriend Reeva Steenkamps on 14 February 2013 when he fired 4 bullets through a locked toilet door. He was taken into police custody and formally charged with murder. South Africa and millions of Pistorius supporters around the globe were captivated by the Valentine's Day tragedy and the once elite athlete's fall from grace. Local and international audiences looked on as his criminal trial was broadcast from the North Gauteng High Court a year later. The double amputee told the court he believed his girlfriend was an intruder and that shooting Reeva was a tragic accident. In October 2014, Judge Thokozile Masipa convicted him of culpable homicide and sentenced him to 5 years imprisonment.
The state did not accept that ruling. It challenged her decision and subsequently convinced the Supreme Court of Appeal that even if Pistorius had believed Reeva Steenkamps to be an intruder, he was still guilty of murder under the principle of dolus eventualis, in that he must have reasonably foreseen that whoever was behind the toilet door would die as a consequence of those bullets being fired through it. The case was then referred back to Judge Masipa for sentencing, and she sentenced Pistorius to 6 years behind bars. What's important to remember is in the interim, he had served his sentence for culpable homicide and been released on parole. The state then appeals the sentence, saying that it's shockingly inappropriate, and the Supreme Court of Appeal again agrees. And it says he doesn't fall out of the parameters of someone who should get less than the 15-year minimum sentence for unpremeditated murder. But because he has served over 10 months, in prison and subsequently in correctional supervision, they deduct that period from the term that the 15-year term, and he's sentenced to 13 years and 5 months.
Pistorius was first legible for parole in March 2023, but the court failed to backdate his sentencing. In August this year, the Supreme Court of Appeal amended Pistorius' sentencing date for a second time to the day he was first sentenced for culpable homicide by Judge Thokozile Masipa. This means that he is now within his rights to lodge an application for parole.
Under South African law, you become eligible for parole under the section of the Criminal Procedure Act that Pistorius was sentenced under after you've completed half your sentence. So the SCA subsequently amending its sentence so that it came into effect when Pistorius was first sentenced for murder, but subsequently again amending it in August so that it came into effect in October 2014, which was when he was first sentenced. Because otherwise he would have had an entire period, that duration of about 506 days, which effectively counted as a non-parole period. And when you're looking at getting parole after half your sentence is completed, those kind of variables are very important.
The process has now begun to collect the information required for the parole board to make an informed decision on Pistorius' parole. As part of this undertaking, Reeva's parents have been invited to meet with Pistorius one-on-one in an engagement called a victim-offender dialogue.
The very much the public perception is that, this was a deliberate killing. And that he intended to kill her, but that was not the finding made by the court. And he has consistently maintained that he believed the person behind the door was an intruder, and that he didn't want to, he would never have harmed Reeva Steenkamps. So I think that's one of the issues that will be pivotal when this victim offender dialogue takes place. And I don't know what the attitude of Reeva's parents are, whether they've accepted the finding that was ultimately made by the court, or that they have their own suspicions about what happened, and if they believe that they may get the answers that they want from that offender dialogue or not.
The victim offender dialogue is said to be an important precursor to the parole hearing and a potential opportunity for reconciliation. However, there are a number of other factors which will also be considered.
The input of the victim's family is an important part of the parole process, but they don't have a veto power. Because ultimately the parole board needs to consider a number of issues. They need to consider a report from a psychologist, a report from a social worker, report from the unit manager where Pistorius has been housed, which is the hospital wing. There's a case management committee report that looks at all those issues, puts them together, and will ultimately make a recommendation on whether or not they believe that Pistorius should be released. In certain instances, particularly in high-profile cases, the voices of the victims do have incredible power. And obviously, this is going to be playing out in a kind of very public way. And so ultimately what they say, I think, is going to be something that is of huge public interest. But if they come out outspokenly and out of that victim-offender dialogue and are not positive about that interaction and don't believe that he has shown genuine remorse, obviously that will be something that, stands against him when he finally is brought before the parole board and is able to address it, as they will be able to, should they so wish.
This week, the Steenkamps did an exclusive live interview on Good Morning Britain in which they discussed their feelings around Pistorius' parole. June Steenkamp, Reeva's mother, said although she had forgiven Oscar, he had shown no remorse and should serve the full sentence behind bars. Reeva's father said he'd like to meet Oscar to find out the truth about what happened. Big question marks remain on when this dialogue will take place and the extent of its impact on Pistorius' chances of being awarded his parole.
I think the most pivotal thing for him, certainly in terms of his own dealing with what has happened, and will be, the impact of this engagement with the Steenkamps. His lawyer said he's wanted to do this for quite some time, and one hopes he uses this opportunity to really give them the genuine apology, which he says he's been trying to give them for, well over 7 years now. This isn't something that is going to bring anyone the sense of relief that Reeva Steenkamp still being alive would. And I think that, the more you engage with the criminal justice system, the more you realize that, there really is a point in which people's lives get shattered to a degree that they never actually really recover. And it's just about, as I said before, learning to live with your brokenness. And I think that is going to be true of everyone involved in this very sad story.